Welcome to the Spool Podcast. Unwind with Dr. Nils Roemer, Dean of the Bass School at UT Dallas.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really lucky and fortunate to sit here today with an immensely accomplished individual, Jeremy Locke. Before we get into talking to him a little bit, let me just give you a little bit of the summary of his many accomplishments. So I'm just going to read this out. Jeremy Locke is an accomplished military veteran who received the Bronze Star for Distinguished Service in Iraq and the Military Photojournalist of the Year award 7 times. His work was featured in National Geographic, Time, Smithsonian Magazine, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, among others. He's traveled to over 40 countries. That's an impressive number.
It's more like 80. But I'm
80
loving
now,
what you're throwing down.
And 6 continents, but that's probably still holds, right?
Yes.
Unless we edit on there anywhere. And he's really a photographer and a passionate one, and has been that probably for almost a better part of your life. So before we get into it, I find it always intriguing to return in lots of ways where everything begins with us, and that is, where we grew up and where we were born. So I think if I got this right, you were born in 1970, so I could ask you about the top hits of the time, but you probably don't remember them. I looked them up, but they're not very meaningless, in lots of ways very meaningless. But tell us where you were born.
First off, thank you for having me. And I love the accolades that you throw down. God, I should have you in my back pocket all the time. But those are just accolades, right? And it takes a lot of hard work to get there, a lot of passion, and a lot of mentorship. But I think with any creative, you're only as good as your last, in my case, photograph. So it constantly pushes me and constantly helps to make me grow. Those are accolades, they're great, but what am I doing today to better myself and my craft?
No, that's in many ways a probably very inspiring line also for many of our listeners, in particular students who in many ways I think are probably even more destined to constantly think about themselves in any given point as being really on a journey, onward, to better themselves and also maybe to a better version of themselves eventually. But let's go back. I'm intrigued.
I love your word journey. So I'll journey you back to, I was born in Alamogordo, New Mexico.
That's right.
And I was born to an Air Force. My dad was Air Force. My mom was a nurse. And I grew up a couple years there. Then we moved on to Tennessee. And then I spent most of my life jumping back from Dayton, Ohio to Washington, D.C. area, back to Dayton, Ohio, where I graduated high school.
So I was intrigued by your birthplace for fairly obvious reasons, I think, insofar as it's a place that has, if I get this right, on the one side, an Air Force base, right?
Yes.
And on the other side, if any one of us knows anything about it, it's a Trinity experience, the first explosion of an atomic bomb. So in lots of ways, you were born and grew up in a place that has all kinds of military traditions. And from there, in lots of ways, it wouldn't be leaping forward too much to say, well, it's not surprising that you ended up as a photographer of war. But the other end of this, and I've never been there, so I relied on Google Pictures, but help me out there, is that it borders also onto the Sacramento Mountains. So there's a phenomenal landscape out there. There's a white sand. And I find that it seems everything is already there that ultimately would dominate quite a bit of your photographic journalism over the year, the engagement with military conflicts and combat, but also a passionate interest in the world beyond, nature, landscape, the beauty thereof. Is that reading your birthplace?
No, you're absolutely right. So, as my journey began, I knew nothing about photography. Nothing, didn't care about it, didn't know about it until the military. And then I was fortunate. I never went back, never even thought about my birthplace other than to write it, on paperwork. And one of my last trips with the military was back to White Sands area where I got to document soldiers out on an exercise. And it's like you said, it's the mountains, but yet there's this rough, raw beauty. And I think one of the things I pride myself on is conditions, right? Like I have this, there's something in me, something in my heart that it could be wartime, but I try to look for the good in humans or the surroundings. Yeah, it might suck to be sitting out in the desert. It might suck for us all, but if you're telling me it sucks all the time and I'm saying it sucks it's going to suck.
It's going to suck, yeah.
Right. So
and I didn't use that word. It was only you, right?
That's right. But taking that different approach, like, yeah, we know it's going to suck here. That's the military suck factor. But what can we do to get through this? And I choose to see, okay, well, look at this little piece of life that's coming out of the desert, right? Or look at these incredible human beings that inhabit the desert. How are their lives different than mine? And it's that inquisitive nature to, I guess, get out and play. I'm generally inquisitive about human beings. How do we all bleed red? But how do you live? How do you get along in life? How do I get along? Where are our commonalities? Where are our differences?
Very, very interesting. But let's get back one more time to the mountains and the desert and all that. I think they're also, do they not instill often on people like a certain awareness or an awe, a kind of recognition that there's something kind of a little bit beyond that requires our kind of care and but also in lots of ways our curiosity. And so I think, in lots of ways when I was looking at these pictures, I think I recognized in the photos like something that I later saw in some of your photos where there's this, incredible awe almost of what seems to have appeared in front of your lens. Would you kind of go along with that?
Absolutely. And with you bringing up like landscape, I was a war photographer. I never did landscapes. I was diving into, poverty Africa or India or other places like human interest stories. And when COVID happened, we had this trip planned to go to India and finish up a story I was working on, and it cut everything off. So a buddy of mine, Army photographer, he was like, why don't we go camping? Like exactly what you're saying. And we went camping through, many places throughout Texas, state parks and stuff. It is this sense of awe when you see something that's just ginormous and you're that little person and how did it get there? And again, noticing those little plants thriving, what's in that ecosystem, but again, being in tune and realizing you're just a small little, speck of this great, beautiful, world that we live in. And we joked, it's like, yeah, we're combat camera guys. And it's like, now I'm combat flower. I'm out there shooting flowers.
Well, but that's the interesting part as I get to know you more and look more at your photos that, when we think about photojournalism, military photography, then we think about there being a very clear dichotomy of sorts. There's a photographer, there's the equipment, there's a gear, there's a shooting, and in lots of ways, it presupposes that there's one really fully in charge of whatever is captured. I mean, the whole vocabulary of military combat and of photojournalism almost runs parallel. Yet, when one looks at your photos, it almost seems as if the object has sometimes pulled you. I mean, what you ultimately end up in many of your photos is almost where you're drawn into something that is kind of pulling you. Would that be a good way of thinking about how in lots of ways your position becomes really unstable and kind of open for new discoveries when you're out and about with your camera?
I absolutely love that you said that. Like the hair on my arms goes up when you can identify with somebody's photo and you're not just looking at a photo and go, okay, that's cool, that's cool, that's cool. It draws you in. So everything that you just named, equipment to this, to that, that's all secondary. I have to know that, right? And especially in a combat situation, or, I'm photographing the baker down the street. I have to know that stuff, but that's all secondary. Again, it's being that fly on the wall and watching life unfold in front of you, and watching that and capturing those moments. Not being a part of it. That's not my job. Isn't to show you what these people are doing. I want you to feel what these people are going through. And by being that fly on the wall, stepping back, being genuinely inquisitive about things, you attain that. And that's what I look for. I'm constantly watching body language. I'm constantly watching reactions. You are looking for that moment.
Fascinating. You were just a moment ago saying you're always as good as the next photo that you're taking. But the guy must have been at some point that, I don't know if you call it their first photo, where you thought, I could actually do something with that. So for our listeners and our students, so at what point did you say, no, there's really something about this photography that really intrigues me, and I want to stick it out, and I kind of can turn this into a career?
That's a great question. So when I came into the military, I wanted to be an X-ray technician. I wanted to do 4 years, get out, have a good trade and move on. But I was given the job as an imagery processor. So the spy planes, the satellite imagery, I was the guy in the dark room processing and printing that stuff. And I loved it because, the president was seeing my work, and this was during the Bosnia War. And it was just amazing. But photographers were traveling all over the world, would drop off their film. For your students that don't know, we used to develop our film, not just push a button and it comes out. But, here's photographers traveling all over the world, and I'm stuck sniffing chemicals in this dark room. And man, it was just like, I want to do that. So I picked up a camera. To get to your question, I thought just taking photographs is going to get me out of filling sandbags, or, we're all on exercise. I'm just here taking pictures. Oh no, we work so much longer and harder, and really diving into that. And then top it off, the biggest, greatest advice I can give anybody who's a photographer is, hey, you got to be out there honing your craft, shoot. But pick up a project that's something that interests you. It could be the bread maker, it could be NASCAR races, whatever, and work with that. Someplace where you can go back over and over. And the key to that project is having a great mentor. My mentors, I'm not here because of myself. I'm here because they saw something in me, made me believe. They gave to me, but they always charged me with one thing, and it's always to give back as freely as it was given to you. So that's my mission now, is to I don't want to be around I want to be around the greatest photographers of all time. Because when you surround yourself with great people, you're only going to rise with them. If they're mentoring and doing it right, they should be pulling you up. Because if they're pulling you up, that means you got to get your game going, right?
No,
so
true.
I'm going to pull myself up. So I always surround myself by the big dogs, sucked in the information, and push them as well as myself.
So that's also why, in many ways, you like now to be out and about. You like, you do your own podcasts. You're here with us today. Later, you're going to give a talk on campus. In many ways, any opportunity that you have to speak about yourself and your work is also, again, a way of advancing yourself, because in many ways, like you said, you're still a photographer, you're still taking photos, and you must be sitting at this point also on a gigantic archive, right, that you're curating, and which probably also still holds its moments of discovery, where you look back at photos or look again at a photo where you're like zooming in and out and you think, oh my God, I had no idea. So I think I like this idea that how do you get good at something? You just keep going at it. You surround yourself with other people who can help you and kind of advance you. And then most importantly, and I think that's a really important lesson also for us here, you kind of have to direct all that effort at something. You called it a project. If you randomly do it, then it kind of loses direction and momentum, and it's also not something that can measure really and feel that you're advancing. But you got to go at I like the bakers. I'm a passionate baker, so I can totally see how one can keep oneself busy with just taking endless amounts of photos of fantastic bread or whatever it is, right? But
it's finding something you're passionate about as well. Because if I have to go do something I don't really want to do, I'm not going to have as much fun doing it. Yes, there's plenty of jobs in the military. I have to go shoot the flight line or whatever. I don't want to do it. But by working on these projects, that my passion projects, that directs me to going, wow, I'm seeing different. I can pull in some really cool things out of this.
So I looked a little bit around and I came across somewhere this quote of yours, which I thought was really intriguing. So let me just read it out and then we can maybe talk a little bit about it. Not only do I get to live my life, but I've been able to live the lives of those that I photographed, even if it was just for a moment. And I find that fascinating because it means as if when you were out and about, you ended up, so to speak, slipping out of yourself and into other people's shoes or roles or whatever. And now we put into, 80 countries, 6 continents, thousands of lives that temporarily you inhabited. What is that like after all of this? Where do you find then, quote unquote, yourself again? I mean, this, as exhilarating as this may have been, it's kind of almost shifts you in many ways. So how do you find in all of this always back yourself and ground yourself again before you want to go out to do something more?
It's so enriching. It is so enriching. Man, I mean, just think about that. Like, I don't only get to live my life, which I love my life, but man, I got to be a homeless teen mom. I got to be an M1 Abrams tank driver. I got to be a fighter pilot. I used to think being a fighter pilot was the coolest job in the world. I got to fly with them. I got to live that life for a day or 2 or 3 or whatever. But I mean, what a blessing to, if tomorrow was my last day, man, I've lived so many lifetimes. Like, I get emotional about it. Like, it's been such a huge blessing just to watch that life unfold. And I'm speechless because it just hits me really hard. Makes me grateful for what I have. But also, it's my responsibility. Not only do I get to live these lives, but it's my responsibility. And I take that heavy. It's my responsibility to share that with you, with the viewers.
No, and I think that's in many ways when one looks at your website, there's a lot that you've shared. I mean, tonight you're going to share quite a bit. Yeah, but I think sometimes when I just look at the longevity of your career, I mean, you were really at the front line of a lot of conflicts, of military conflicts, Iran, Iraq, Bosnia, and so on and so forth. But when I look at your photos, so on some level they speak to conflicts, war, loss, violence, and all that. But there's also this other archive of sorts in there of humanity, of beauty,
hope.
of help, and all of that. And as strange as it sounds, but one could almost invert some of your photos into a kind of curated show of that actually really beautiful past that you captured, which overtly is maybe a little bit contradictory if I introduce you as a military photographer, but there's quite a bit of that in your archive. While all the other stuff, the good stuff, would you agree with that? Or
100%. And again, it's not really about me. It's what I see. And I guess I choose to see the good in humans. So I'm constantly looking
for it.
I feel humans can't be evil all the time, right? War is a crappy thing, just not a good place to be. But out of war, you speak about my archives, and as we grow older and learn more and get better at our craft, we go back and we look at those. And there's one image that I found many years after being over in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it is a picture of an Afghani riding this bike, and on the back has a woman with a burqa on it.
Oh yeah, I think I've seen that one.
And I'm glad because that's one of the images you chose.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's one.
so
Incredible colors also, right? I mean,
yeah.
so vivid. I remember this now. Yes.
But a slice of time.
Yeah.
That was a slice of time, and that guy's face is just this big happy I mean, we're military trucks going by, and his place is in war, and he's sitting with a lady with a burqa on the back, but he looks like he's just having the time of his life. Like, I didn't see bad person. I didn't see good person. I saw somebody that has hope.
That slice of a
that
moment
little
there.
slice of a moment.
Now, I remember looking at that because I had that slightly impossible task of finding the 12 photos or 14 or whatever I picked out of this, I don't know, thousands of photos that you've taken. So for me, also really an enriching experience. So I enjoyed it as much as I accepted right from the beginning the impossibility of that assignment. It was lots of, well,
you did a great job.
Well, how do you do it? But I think, well, this is a good opportunity really to kind of delve a little bit into what you've accomplished. So what do you do now? Like you talked about projects evolving, still taking photos, still going out to kind of inhabit other people's lives and kind of see new things and kind of are driven by their curiosity. What are your projects now that you're working on?
During COVID, before COVID, I was working with a military organization called Air Power Foundation. And they're an organization that raises money to give to other military nonprofit organizations. And I've been allowed to photograph Medal of Honor recipients. So I've started photographing these heroes. These are like my heroes that they're just like you and I. I don't know how I'm going to react in a combat situation. It was just something in them that popped. And I was like, man, I would love the opportunity to photograph. I've probably photographed more than half of the living recipients. And then that turned into my big love, which I think's the greatest project I'm working on to date, I have ever worked on, is my podcast called Last Letters. And Last Letters is, if tomorrow was your final day on earth, what would you say and who would you say it to? And you have to actually write a letter.
Oh, wow.
And it has been so powerful. We're about 86 episodes in. Everything from Medal of Honor recipients to, prisoners to, astronauts and explorers, your person next door, immigrants. I mean, it's just been incredible. But if we can truly stop, and listen to the person that we're sitting down with, doesn't matter if you're right, left, I like blue, you like purple. Let's stop with all those differences. Let's have a conversation. Let's sit down. And the people I'm talking about that can't wait. I hear you, but I'm not really listening to you because I can't wait to tell you about me. If we stop and listen to those, even if we don't agree with them, can we pick something up? Can we learn something from them? And I've learned so much from these individuals. You want to talk about enriching your life, and think about last day on earth. What would you say to something? What would you leave? And it also gives people an opportunity to leave a legacy.
I think time is really a powerful element in many ways. What you seem to be doing now on the podcast, in lots of ways, what you describe as a listening, on some level may not be all that different from taking photos because you were attentive and were listening and kind of waiting for a moment. But I think
That's pretty good. I hadn't thought of that.
Right. But we have a tendency, I think, of often thinking about our lives forward, right? And I think when one is forced into an exercise like what would that look like, we think about our moment in time in a very different way. And I think we're right now in this kind of moment in our time, in our societies, and maybe also age-wise, where you and I are, that, in lots of ways we think, we have two ways to think about ourselves, or three: in the moment, really to slow down and really to listen to someone, think about where we came from, where we're going, but also what we want to leave behind. And I think that's another very powerful way, whether it's with those letters or with the photo archives or with the kids that we raise.
I'm glad you brought that up. You were, and I was going to bring that up, but I'm so glad you brought it up because accolades don't have to be your legacy. Being a great father is an amazing legacy.
But it's a little bit like the photography. it's never quite complete, but it's always ongoing, right? You know,
it's gonna throw
mine
you
are
a
like a little
curveball.
older now, and I'm like, my youngest one has just gone off to college, and in lots of ways, you never quite slip out of that role, and nor should you. In lots of ways, it's an ongoing project.
Absolutely.
But also, therefore, as has its beauty. Let me ask you one other thing. We're sitting here in a school that has technology in its name. There's a lot of talk over the last couple of years about how these days, because of the internet, we're drowning in photos, right? Photos are everywhere. And on any given moment, we can access vast archives about anything. And the extent to which this constant presence of photos, while one drowns us, but also has lots of ways contribute to the lessening of value of the kind of artistic photography that you stand in. What's your view on this? Where's photography in this day and age where the technology that you and I have in the pocket surpasses probably by a lot the technology that you had some 10 or 15 or 20 years ago to take photos? Is that changing the ways in which you go out and about when you are trying to capture these moments that have endless technical abilities now that you may not have had before? You can produce it on your computer in the moment. Is it changing, or
yeah. So this is a very touchy subject with me. And again, this is just my opinion, but it takes me longer to grasp and learn things. When I was a young photographer, there was another person, and she would get the assignment and she'd go out and right away and nail it. Where me, I had to, it hasn't come up for me to use it yet. I'll use it. And I believe I became better in the long run. But man, the technology, nothing drives me more crazy when I'll post to Instagram or something like that. And I mean, it could be a Pulitzer Prize winning image and it gets, let's say 100 likes. Mm-hmm. You put a darn cat photo up there and it's got 2 million likes. I just don't get it. We are in an information overload. I take a step back and I remember how I talked about surrounding ourselves with greatness and stuff, but I don't worry about what other people are doing around me. What is my job? What's my mission? Where do I want to get? What are the people that I want to bring up with me? That's where I want to put my focus. So I don't care what other people are doing. We are in an information overload where you're just seeing tons of photos, and then you have AI coming up, which I am. Again, tomorrow I could change. I'm not an AI fan. I think it has its place. But one of the things as a photographer drives me nuts is seeing a photographer's page, and it literally says photographer at the top, and I stopped. I mean, these AI images are making me stop going, oh my goodness, how did they get this? What? And then you read it as AI. And then I look down this photographer's, work, and it's, hundreds of posts of AI. I'm like, well, you're calling yourself a photographer. I mean, you're typing stuff in and it creates it. That's okay. Call yourself an artist or something like that. And then you get to, I challenge your listeners to go find these people and then get to the very bottom when they started and you look at their work as a photographer and it's not great.
Let me I understand you're passionate about this, but let me try to get at that question maybe in a different way. And that is, I'm a historian by trade. And so one of the things that intrigues me always is with the invention of technologies, the extent to which new visual cultures started to emerge and how we also kind of started to see things differently. So because I'm like a historian, I fall often into the kind of 1920s, the Leica, first Leica. And the first Leica, when it came onto the market, I think 1927, has often been credited with really having created a whole new world of seeing. Not just capturing, but a whole new way of seeing. And so that's what I'm wondering about. Where are we now when we are like drowning in these pictures with our ability to see? You talked about our ability or lack thereof of listening. I would maybe come along that and say are we losing our ability to see really when we are drowning in? So how much, are we these days actually, when you and I are sitting here having a good time, I'm looking at you, I'm kind of guessing on how you're responding to my questions based on how you're moving. And so I'm trying to look and see, but how much of that we'll lose if we are just constantly drowning in images?
I think that's the art of finding a great mentor or the older people, right? Your past generations that, again, it's all the same. Technology has definitely gotten better. It's allowing us to see in lower light and be able to create in different ways. But I still think it's our responsibility to see the world in an unbiased situation. As a photojournalist, as a creator, I want you to see the world in your light and in the way that you see it and bring that. So
is that then in the end the kind of value that we as kind of consumers of your photos still derive, that you force us into your world just for that moment, that we are just really focused on that and just really are with you as much as we can, and then kind of drift again into ourselves, but at least momentarily.
Man, you make me think.
Well, that's what we're doing here,
Yes, I do I want you to see for a brief moment into my world. And I think that's what technology has done, right? Is giving us, we don't spend time. I mean, it's really got to really stop you, to have you stop and then flip the page. And, scrolling's like this, but to actually turn a newspaper or turn a magazine and feel and hold that, there's a whole different process to it. I hope that someday we get back to that or slow down a little bit.
So do you still develop film then once in a while? Do you go back?
Man, what's so funny is I tried on a Hasselblad. Buddy lent me a camera, I'm going to try this out, shoot some portraits. Oh, it was horrible.
It was not good?
No.
It was not like the nostalgic trip you were hoping for?
It was costly, and I sucked at it.
That's funny, because at some point that would have been your default, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But think about, again, like your painters, one painter, right? Back in your Renaissance days and them painting, to now, you got one, well, they can keep painting over it, I guess. But then you have like the photographers, 20, 30 years, 40s, 50s. They had those 6 to 12 shot cameras with a flash, and they were pulling amazing rolls or images out of like 1 or 2 shots. And then you get to when I started, and you were lucky to get a couple, 2, 3 keepers out of a 24, 36 roll exposure. So the beauty of the technology and that aspect is amazing. And I'm very you have me wishy-washy on it, because I
well,
do.
That's good, right?
No, it is. And I appreciate technology, but maybe I'm scared of it too. I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, when I can sit here and create something by just putting in a couple sentences, but you're not out there listening to the heartbeat of that homeless teen mom as the baby's crying and wants food, or rolling down, a city in Iraq in a tank. That's what people are missing in today.
But in the end of the day, most of us will probably not visit 80 countries and will not necessarily get to all 6 continents. But tonight's show is titled Outside My Front Door. And I guess we started out with where you were born in 1970s. And would it be fair to say that for any one of us, that front door is wherever we are? Wherever we're willing to look and see and whatever we want to do there. And wherever we want to take our photos. We're teaching photography in the school, and I'm sure quite a few students would love to think about photography also as a way of traveling the world, but they also in many ways have much to discover here. Would you go along with that? Or
Oh, I got a little spiel for you on that.
that's a good way then to finish this.
Absolutely. When I say right outside your front door, I mean right outside your front door. As a young military photographer training younger people, they're like, we call it going to Africa. It's like, oh man, I'd love to go to Africa. I'd come back with amazing. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's easy. And I would sit there to my younger troops and go, I would love to take you. When you're ready, I would love to take you to experience the world. But why am I going to take you when you can't go down the street and shoot? Open your front door, photograph the local baker, stories around your community that are impacting. What? Just because you go to Africa, there's starving people here. Same in Africa.
Right.
It's just different levels. So I really mean open up your front door, and there's. Have you traveled 2 blocks down to the left on your street, and who lives there?
I think that's a really powerful way of concluding our conversation here. Go and visit Jeremy's website if you want to travel with him afar. And if you don't, just open up your door and see what's right there. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you guys.